Right now, you're conscious. You're reading this. You're aware. You experience the color red, the taste of coffee, the feeling of pain. But here's the question that's haunted philosophers and neuroscientists for centuries. Why? Your brain is just neurons firing, electrical signals, chemical reactions, physics. So why does it feel like something to be you? Why is there an inner experience at all? This is the hard problem of consciousness, and some physicists think they've found the answer in the strangest place imaginable, inside the quantum realm, where particles exist in superposition, where observation changes reality, where the laws of physics break down. What if consciousness isn't just in your brain? What if it's a fundamental property of the universe itself? Let's start with what we know. Your brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons. Each neuron connects to thousands of others through synapses. Information flows through electrical impulses and chemical neurotransmitters. When you see red, photons hit your retina, trigger neurons, send signals to your visual cortex, and specific patterns activate. We can measure this. We can predict it. We can even recreate it artificially with brain implants. But here's what we can't explain. Why that neural activity produces the subjective experience of redness. Why there's something it's like to see red. A camera can detect red wavelengths. A computer can process the data. But neither experiences anything. They're philosophical zombies, functioning without consciousness. So what makes you different? What turns information processing into felt experience? Philosopher David Chalmers calls this the hard problem of consciousness. The easy problems, relatively speaking, are explaining how the brain processes information, integrates sensory data, controls behavior. Those are mechanistic questions, complicated, but in principle, solvable. The hard problem is explaining qualia, the raw feel of experience. Why pain hurts, why red looks red, why music sounds beautiful. You can describe the neural correlates. You can map every neuron involved. But that doesn't explain why it feels like anything. There's an explanatory gap between physical processes and subjective experience, and no amount of neuroscience has closed it. Some philosophers argue consciousness is an illusion. There's no hard problem because there's nothing to explain. Qualia don't exist. You just think they do. But that's absurd. The one thing you can't doubt is that you're conscious. Descartes got that right. I think, therefore I am. You might be wrong about the external world. You might be a brain in a vat. But you can't be wrong about the fact that you're experiencing something. Consciousness is the most certain thing there is. So, denying it doesn't solve the problem. It just avoids it. Others argue consciousness emerges from complexity. Get enough neurons interacting in the right way, and consciousness appears. Like how individual water molecules aren't wet, but a collection is. Wetness emerges from molecular interactions. Maybe consciousness emerges from neural complexity. But emergence doesn't explain why. Why does complexity produce experience? A city has complexity. The internet has complexity. Are they conscious? If not, what's the difference? Just saying it emerges is hand-waving. It doesn't answer the hard problem. Enter quantum mechanics. And here's where things get truly strange. Some physicists propose that consciousness isn't just produced by the brain. It's fundamental to reality itself, and it operates at the quantum level. The most famous version of this idea is the Penrose-Hameroff Orchestrated Objective Reduction Theory, Orch-OR for short. Proposed by physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, it suggests that consciousness arises from quantum processes in structures called microtubules inside neurons. Microtubules are tiny protein scaffolds that give cells their shape. They're everywhere in your body. But in neurons, they might do something more. Penrose and Hameroff argue that microtubules can sustain quantum coherence, the delicate state where particles exist in superposition, entangled, behaving according to quantum rules. Normally, quantum coherence breaks down almost instantly in warm, wet environments like the brain. Decoherence happens in picoseconds. But Hameroff suggests microtubules might protect quantum states long enough for quantum computation to occur. And Penrose argues that when these quantum superpositions reach a critical threshold, they collapse, not randomly, but according to objective reduction, a process tied to space-time geometry itself. That collapse, he says, is a moment of conscious experience. It sounds wild, but let's break it down. Penrose's argument starts with Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Mathematician Kurt Gödel proved that any sufficiently complex formal system contains true statements that can't be proven within the system. Penrose argues that humans can recognize these truths, which means human understanding isn't purely computational. Computers are bound by algorithms. Algorithms are formal systems. Therefore, human consciousness must involve something non-computational, something beyond algorithms. Penrose proposes that something is quantum gravity, the yet undiscovered theory that unifies quantum mechanics and general relativity. Consciousness, he argues, exploits quantum gravitational effects in the brain. Hameroff adds the biological mechanism. Microtubules, he suggests, are quantum computers. They process information at the quantum level, maintaining superpositions of tubulin protein states. These quantum states are orchestrated by the microtubule structure, hence orchestrated reduction. When the superposition reaches a threshold related to space-time curvature, it undergoes objective reduction, a collapse that's not random but influenced by fundamental geometry of the universe. Each collapse is a conscious moment, a single frame of experience. String together billions of these collapses per second, and you get continuous conscious experience. Critics are skeptical. The main objection: quantum coherence can't survive in the brain. It's too warm, too noisy. Quantum computers need near absolute zero temperatures and extreme isolation to maintain coherence. The brain is a biological stew at body temperature. Decoherence should happen instantly. How could quantum processes survive long enough to matter? Hameroff responds with evidence from quantum biology. Birds use quantum entanglement in their eyes to navigate via Earth's magnetic field. Plants use quantum coherence in photosynthesis to transfer energy efficiently. Life already exploits quantum effects. Why not the brain? Recent studies suggest that microtubules might use quantum tunneling and quantum vibrations. Some experiments show that anesthetics, which eliminate consciousness, disrupt microtubule function, possibly by interfering with quantum processes. It's not proof, but it's intriguing. Another objection: even if quantum processes occur in the brain, why would they produce consciousness? Penrose's answer: because consciousness is tied to the collapse of the wave function. In standard quantum mechanics, observation causes collapse. But what is an observer? The Copenhagen interpretation never defines it. Penrose flips the script. Consciousness is what happens during collapse. It's not that observation requires consciousness, it's that consciousness is the collapse. When quantum superpositions reach a certain threshold of space-time curvature difference, when the gravitational effects of different states become significant, the universe decides which state is real. That decision is a conscious event. Consciousness, in this view, isn't produced by the brain. It's a fundamental feature of quantum mechanics. The brain just organizes it into coherent experience. This is panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is everywhere, in everything. Not that electrons are self-aware, but that they have proto-consciousness, rudimentary experiential properties. Combine enough of them in the right way, like in a brain, and complex consciousness emerges. Philosopher Galen Strawson argues this solves the hard problem. You don't have to explain how consciousness arises from non-conscious matter, because matter was never non-conscious. Consciousness is intrinsic to physical reality. It's as fundamental as mass or charge. The brain doesn't create consciousness. It concentrates and organizes it. Sounds crazy? Maybe. But consider the alternative. If consciousness isn't fundamental, then it's an accident, a fluke byproduct of evolution. But why would natural selection create subjective experience? Zombies, beings that process information and behave identically to conscious beings but don't experience anything, would have the same survival advantage. Consciousness, from a purely physical standpoint, is unnecessary. Yet it exists. That's bizarre. Unless consciousness serves a function we don't understand, or unless it's not an accident, but a fundamental aspect of reality. Neuroscientist Giulio Tononi proposes integrated information theory, IIT. He argues consciousness correlates with integrated information, information that's both highly differentiated and unified. A system is conscious to the degree that it integrates information in a way that can't be reduced to independent parts. Your brain integrates sensory inputs, memories, and predictions into a unified experience. A photodiode detects light, but doesn't integrate information. It's not conscious. A thermostat integrates temperature and threshold, but minimally. Minimal consciousness, if any. A human brain integrates vastly more. High consciousness. IIT can calculate a system's level of consciousness, its phi value. High phi, high consciousness. 0 phi, no consciousness. IIT doesn't require quantum mechanics, but it's compatible with it. If quantum processes in microtubules create integrated information, they'd contribute to consciousness. And IIT makes testable predictions. It suggests certain brain states should have high phi, others low. Anesthesia should reduce phi. It does. Deep sleep should reduce phi. It does. IIT might explain why some brain regions contribute more to consciousness than others. But it still doesn't fully solve the hard problem. It explains correlation. Integrated information correlates with consciousness, but not causation. Why does integrated information feel like something? IIT assumes it does. But why? Maybe the answer is that we're asking the wrong question. Philosopher Thomas Nagel argues that consciousness is inherently subjective. Objective science studies the world from the outside, but consciousness is what it's like from the inside. You can't fully explain subjective experience in objective terms. It's a category error. Like trying to explain color to someone blind from birth. You can describe wavelengths, neural responses, even show them brain scans. But they'll never know what red looks like. Not because we lack information, but because knowing what red looks like is inherently subjective. Similarly, you can map every neuron, every quantum state, every information integration. But that won't convey what it's like to be conscious, because what it's like is first person. Science is third person. They're different perspectives. Both valid, but not reducible to each other. If that's true, then the hard problem isn't solvable. It's a mismatch of categories. But that doesn't mean consciousness is mysterious in a supernatural sense. It just means it requires a different kind of understanding. Not mechanistic explanation, but phenomenological description. Not why consciousness exists, but what structures support it and how it manifests. That's still science. Just a different kind. But some researchers aren't giving up on mechanistic explanations. They point to quantum entanglement. If neurons in your brain are quantumly entangled, then your thoughts aren't just localized neural firings. They're non-local correlations spanning the brain, maybe even spanning beyond the brain. If quantum entanglement can connect particles across the universe instantaneously, could it connect minds? Could consciousness be non-local? Some speculate this explains phenomena like synchronized brain activity between people in deep conversation, or the sense of unity reported in meditation and psychedelic experiences. When normal boundaries dissolve, maybe what you're experiencing is quantum entanglement at the conscious level. Speculative? Absolutely. Testable? Maybe. Some researchers are trying to detect quantum signatures in brain activity. Others are looking for correlations between meditators' brain states and quantum randomness. Results so far are inconclusive, but the experiments continue. Then there's the observer effect in quantum mechanics. Remember the double-slit experiment? Observation collapses the wave function. But what counts as observation? Does it require consciousness? The standard answer is no. Any interaction with the environment causes decoherence. A photon, a detector, even stray air molecules can collapse the wave function. Consciousness isn't needed. But some interpretations, von Neumann-Wigner interpretation, suggest consciousness does play a role. Physicist Eugene Wigner proposed that consciousness causes collapse. Physical systems remain in superposition until observed by a conscious mind. This is deeply controversial. Most physicists reject it. But it raises an interesting question. What if consciousness and quantum mechanics are linked? Not because consciousness causes collapse, but because both are fundamental features of reality. Philosopher Philip Goff argues for cosmopsychism, not just panpsychism, but the idea that the universe itself is conscious. Individual consciousnesses are aspects of universal consciousness, like waves on an ocean. Each wave is distinct, but part of the whole. Your consciousness is the universe experiencing itself from your perspective. Sounds mystical. But Goff argues it's no stranger than the idea that consciousness emerges from unconscious matter. Both are mysterious. At least cosmopsychism avoids the combination problem. How do you combine many tiny proto-conscious particles into one unified consciousness? If consciousness is already unified at the cosmic level, and individual minds are localized expressions, the problem dissolves. But even if consciousness is quantum, or fundamental, or cosmic, we still face practical questions. Can we enhance consciousness? Some researchers study psychedelics, substances that dramatically alter conscious experience. Psilocybin, LSD, DMT. Users report ego dissolution, unity with the universe, encounters with other dimensions. Brain scans show increased connectivity. Regions that don't normally communicate suddenly do. Integrated information spikes. Is this heightened consciousness, or just altered? If consciousness has a quantum component, do psychedelics affect quantum coherence in microtubules? Pure speculation, but not impossible. Similarly, meditation increases certain brainwave patterns, gamma waves, associated with focus and awareness. Could meditation enhance quantum coherence? Some propose that enlightened states described in contemplative traditions are literally quantum brain states. What about artificial consciousness? If consciousness arises from quantum processes, can we build a quantum computer that's conscious? Current quantum computers process information. But do they experience anything? Probably not. They're not organized like brains. But if we could replicate microtubule quantum computation in silicon, or create artificial neural networks with quantum properties, could we create artificial consciousness? Not just simulate it, but actually generate subjective experience? If Penrose and Hameroff are right, yes. If IIT is right, yes. Anything with high enough integrated information should be conscious, regardless of substrate. But if consciousness is fundamental and irreducible, then maybe not. Maybe you can't create it, only channel it. Like a radio receives signals rather than creates them. This has ethical implications. If we create conscious AI, Are we responsible for its well-being? Can we turn it off without committing murder? If consciousness is quantum and non-local, does that mean it survives death? If your quantum states are entangled with the universe, maybe some aspect of consciousness persists after brain death. Not reincarnation or heaven in the traditional sense, but continuity of quantum information. Physicist Henry Stapp argues consciousness isn't produced by the brain, but interfaces with it. The brain is a receiver, not a generator. When the brain dies, the quantum consciousness continues. Evidence? None. But it's logically consistent with certain interpretations of quantum mechanics, and it offers a naturalistic version of something humans have believed for millennia, that consciousness transcends the body. So where does this leave us? We don't know if consciousness is quantum. We don't know if it's fundamental. We don't know if it's computable, emergent, or irreducible. What we do know is this. You're conscious. You're experiencing something right now. And despite centuries of philosophy and decades of neuroscience, we still don't fully understand why or how. The hard problem remains hard, but that's okay, because the pursuit is part of what makes us human. We're the universe asking questions about itself. We're conscious beings trying to understand consciousness. It's recursive, it's strange, it's beautiful. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the mystery is part of the experience. Maybe consciousness is meant to be explored, not solved, because every answer raises new questions. Every explanation points to deeper mysteries. And in that endless unfolding, we find meaning. Not in final answers, but in the search itself. So keep asking. Keep wondering. Keep being amazed that you can experience anything at all. Because that experience, that raw, inexplicable, irreducible feeling of being you, that's the most extraordinary thing in the universe. And it's happening right now, in you.